The rising war between Iran, America, and Israel. The Middle East has long been one of the most unstable regions in the world. For decades, political rivalries, ideological conflicts, and military alliances have shaped the region's history. But in recent years, tensions between Iran, the United States, and Israel have reached a dangerous level. Many analysts believe that this rivalry could lead to one of the most serious conflicts of the modern era. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is that all three actors involved are powerful military forces with strong allies and strategic interests across the Middle East. To understand why tensions between Iran, the United States, and Israel are so intense today, we must first look at the history behind this conflict. Surprisingly, Iran and the United States were once allies. During the Cold War, Iran was ruled by a pro-Western monarch named Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Under his rule, Iran maintained close relations with the United States and also had relatively quiet diplomatic ties with Israel. However, everything changed in 1979 when the Iranian Revolution took place. The revolution overthrew the Shah and brought a new Islamic government to power under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. After the revolution, Iran adopted a strongly anti-Western political stance and openly criticized both the United States and Israel. Since that moment, relations between Iran and the United States have remained extremely hostile. One of the first major crises occurred when Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran and held dozens of American diplomats hostage for more than a year. This event shocked the world and deeply damaged relations between the two countries. Over the following decades, tensions continued through economic sanctions, military confrontations, and political disputes. At the same time, Iran's relationship with Israel also deteriorated rapidly. The new Iranian leadership refused to recognize Israel as a legitimate state and began supporting armed groups that opposed Israeli influence in the region. Iran provided support to organizations such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Israel viewed these groups as serious threats to its national security and accused Iran of attempting to surround Israel with hostile forces. As a result, Israel increasingly considered Iran its most dangerous enemy in the Middle East. Another major factor that intensified the conflict was Iran's nuclear program. Iran claims that its nuclear activities are designed only for peaceful purposes, such as energy production and scientific research. However, Israel and the United States have long feared that Iran could use its nuclear program to develop nuclear weapons. This possibility created enormous concern because a nuclear-armed Iran could dramatically change the balance of power in the Middle East. In 2015, an international agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action attempted to resolve this issue. Under this agreement, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear activities in exchange for relief from economic sanctions imposed by Western countries. For a few years, the deal helped reduce tensions between Iran and the West. However, in 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement and reimposed strict economic sanctions on Iran. After that decision, tensions between Iran, the United States, and Israel began rising again. Throughout the early 2020s, the rivalry between Israel and Iran became what experts describe as a shadow war. Instead of fighting directly, both sides engaged in secret operations, cyber attacks, assassinations, and military strikes in other countries, such as Syria and Iraq. Israel frequently launched airstrikes against Iranian military targets in Syria, while Iran strengthened its network of allied militias across the region. The situation became even more dangerous after the war in Gaza began in 2023. The conflict triggered a chain reaction across the Middle East, with Iran-backed groups launching attacks against Israeli targets and sometimes against American military bases in the region. As these tensions grew, the United States increased its military presence in the Middle East to protect its allies and strategic interests. By 2025, the conflict entered a new and much more dangerous phase. In June 2025, Israel launched a series of surprise strikes against Iranian military infrastructure and nuclear facilities. The United States soon became involved in the operation and carried out attacks on several Iranian nuclear sites, including facilities at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. These strikes were designed to slow down Iran's nuclear program and prevent it from developing nuclear weapons. The conflict quickly escalated into what analysts called the 12-day war. During this short but intense confrontation, both sides exchanged missile attacks and airstrikes. Iran retaliated by launching missiles toward Israeli territory and targeting American military bases in the region. Although a temporary ceasefire was eventually announced, the underlying tensions between the countries remained unresolved. By early 2026, the situation became even more dramatic. In February 2026, Israel and the United States launched a coordinated military operation targeting Iranian military and nuclear facilities across the country. The strikes hit multiple cities and strategic installations, marking one of the most serious escalations in decades. Iran responded with missile and drone attacks aimed at Israeli targets and American bases in the region. The conflict quickly spread across the region and created fears that the conflict could turn into a full-scale war involving multiple countries. The consequences of these attacks were immediate. Oil prices surged, global markets became unstable, and several countries in the Gulf region closed their airspace due to security concerns. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important shipping routes for global oil supplies, also became a major point of tension. Approximately 20% of the world's oil passes through this narrow waterway, and any disruption there can affect the global economy. At the same time, international organizations such as the United Nations warned that the conflict could spiral into a wider regional war if diplomatic solutions were not found quickly. Many world leaders called for restraint and negotiations to prevent further escalation. Despite these warnings, the rivalry between Iran, Israel, and the United States remains one of the most volatile geopolitical situations in the world today. And the question now facing the international community is simple but frightening. Is this just another regional conflict, or could it become the beginning of a much larger war in the Middle East? As tensions between Iran, the United States, and Israel intensified, the Middle East entered one of the most dangerous periods in its modern history. The conflict was no longer limited to secret operations and indirect attacks. Instead, the world began witnessing direct military confrontations, missile strikes, and strategic operations targeting some of the most sensitive locations in the region. For decades, experts had warned that a confrontation between these powers could destabilize the entire Middle East, and now those warnings were beginning to feel closer to reality. One of the most serious flashpoints in this conflict has been the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway connects the Persian Gulf to the global oceans and serves as one of the most important energy routes in the world. Nearly a fifth of the world's oil supply passes through this channel every day. Because of its strategic importance, control of the Strait of Hormuz has always been a major concern for both Iran and Western powers. During periods of rising tension, Iran has repeatedly warned that it could block the strait if it comes under attack. Such a move would disrupt global oil shipments and create an economic crisis that could affect countries around the world. As the confrontation escalated, the United States began increasing its military presence across the region. American aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and advanced missile defense systems were deployed to protect allies and strategic bases.
Military installations in countries such as Qatar, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates became critical points for American operations in the region. These bases allow the United States to monitor Iranian activities and respond quickly to any military threat. Israel, meanwhile, has continued to develop one of the most advanced defense systems in the world. Systems such as the Iron Dome and other missile interception technologies were designed to protect Israeli cities from rocket and missile attacks. These systems have successfully intercepted thousands of incoming projectiles over the years. However, military experts warn that if a large-scale conflict erupts, even advanced defense systems could be overwhelmed by massive missile barrages. Iran has also significantly expanded its military capabilities over the past decade. The country has invested heavily in ballistic missile technology, drone warfare, and cyber operations. Iranian missiles have the ability to reach targets across the Middle East, including Israel and American bases in the region. In addition to its conventional military forces, Iran also relies on a network of allied groups and militias across several countries. These groups operate in places such as Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, and they can launch attacks that indirectly challenge Israeli and American interests. The involvement of these groups makes the conflict far more complicated. A single attack carried out by one of these militias could trigger retaliation from Israel or the United States, which could then lead to a broader regional confrontation. This chain reaction effect is one of the main reasons why the situation remains so fragile. Another critical aspect of the conflict is cyber warfare. In the modern era, wars are no longer fought only with tanks and missiles. Cyber attacks can disrupt power grids, communication networks, and financial systems. Over the years, both Israel and Iran have been accused of launching sophisticated cyber operations against each other's infrastructure. These digital battles often occur silently, but can have serious consequences for national security. The economic impact of the conflict has also been significant. Whenever tensions rise between Iran, Israel, and the United States, global oil markets react immediately. Oil prices often surge because investors fear disruptions in supply from the Middle East. Higher energy prices can affect transportation, food production, and industrial activity across the world. In this way, a regional conflict in the Middle East can quickly turn into a global economic problem. Beyond economics and military strategy, the human cost of such a conflict would be enormous. Large-scale warfare in the Middle East would likely lead to massive civilian displacement, destruction of infrastructure, and humanitarian crises. Cities could face bombardment, and millions of people might be forced to flee their homes in search of safety. Hospitals, schools, and essential services could be severely affected, creating long-term challenges for recovery and stability. Therefore, many international organizations and world leaders have called for diplomatic solutions. Negotiations, ceasefires, and international agreements are often seen as the only way to prevent a catastrophic war. However, diplomacy in this region has always been difficult. Deep political mistrust, ideological differences, and historical grievances continue to make compromise extremely challenging. Despite these difficulties, there have been occasional attempts to reduce tensions. Some countries have tried to mediate discussions between Iran and Western powers in hopes of reviving nuclear agreements or establishing new security arrangements. These diplomatic efforts aim to limit nuclear development, reduce military confrontations, and build a framework for long-term stability in the region. However, the future remains uncertain. The rivalry between Iran, Israel, and the United States is driven by complex strategic interests that cannot be easily resolved. Each side believes it must defend its national security and protect its influence in the region. As long as these interests continue to clash, the possibility of conflict will remain. Some analysts believe that a full-scale war is unlikely because all sides understand the devastating consequences such a conflict would bring. Others argue that the risk of accidental escalation remains high. A single miscalculation, a missile strike, or a misinterpreted military move could quickly spiral into a larger confrontation. In many ways, the conflict between Iran, Israel, and the United States represents the broader struggle for power and influence in the Middle East. It is a conflict shaped by history, politics, religion, and strategic competition. The decisions made by leaders in the coming years could determine whether the region moves toward stability or deeper conflict. For now, the world continues to watch closely as events unfold. The Middle East has always been a region where small events can lead to major consequences. And in the case of Iran, Israel, and the United States, the stakes are higher than ever before. The question that remains is not only whether these countries will avoid war, but whether diplomacy, negotiation, and international cooperation can prevent a catastrophic crisis that could reshape the future of the entire region. The answer to that question may define the next chapter of global history.